The main character of our story is a 20-year-old girl. A girl who has lived most of her life beside a mother who seems to quietly hate her. There were no arguments that shook the walls, no broken plates. Only a careful distance, a cold tone at dinner, a steady dislike that never needed to be spoken aloud. That feeling began 10 years earlier. On a night she remembers in perfect detail. Her mother pulled a small bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it, without saying a single word. The girl stood in the doorway, watching shirts and dresses land in the bag. In her world, bags never meant holidays. They meant endings, people leaving, visits that didn't continue. Her mother zipped the bag, grabbed it with one hand, and wrapped the other around the girl's wrist. There was no question, no choice. That firm grip decided everything for both of them. Her father was standing in the half-open doorway. To the girl, that image became the saddest picture she owned. His shoulders slightly bent, his eyes full of a desperate, helpless plea. His voice cracked as he asked them not to go. Begged her mother to stay. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the sound of something breaking inside him. Her mother never looked back. She tightened her grip, stepped past him, and closed the door. The house that had felt safe a few hours earlier disappeared behind them into the dark. From that night on, the girl carried one clear story. Her mother had stolen her life and dragged her away from the only parent who truly loved her. There was no explanation to soften it. No late-night talk, no half-truth. Not even a comforting lie. Only the frozen picture of her father in the doorway and the echo of his broken voice. Years passed. New streets, new schools, taller mirrors, a deeper voice when she argued back. But that night stayed unchanged, replaying every time she glanced at the woman she now lived with. At night, when sleep came slowly, she saw her father again, in that narrow frame of the door. In her mind, he became the abandoned one, the quiet victim she had been ripped away from. Her mother, in that same story, became the thief. The hatred never exploded. It settled in her chest like a stone she carried everywhere, heavy, familiar, and always just warm enough to burn. Through all those years, her mother lived in almost perfect silence. She worked, cooked, paid bills, and folded clothes. No confession, no apology. Only calm breathing moving through their small apartment. Then came the night of her 20th birthday. The kitchen smelled of fresh tea. Outside, the city hummed softly. Inside, the clock crept toward midnight as if it were afraid to arrive. Her mother walked in carrying a small cake. No decorations, no laughter, no guests. It looked less like a celebration and more like a quiet duty that returned once a year and had to be completed. She set the cake on the table and lit a thin candle. The flame wavered. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence felt old and overdue, like something that had been postponed too long. Then her mother turned away from the table and went to the cabinet by the wall. The girl watched as she opened a low drawer she rarely touched and reached inside. From it, her mother took out a small, worn box, its corners softened by time, a thin layer of dust along its edges. She placed it beside the cake, where the candlelight flickered across its surface. In that moment, the air changed. Her heartbeat slowed, as if time itself had paused to listen. Because that girl, the one who had grown up beside this silence and hatred, was not a stranger to me. That girl was me. My mother said it was time for me to know the truth. The words were simple, but they tilted the room. The chair still held me, yet suddenly the floor felt less reliable beneath my feet. She opened the box. Inside were folded papers, yellowing at the edges, handwritten notes with dates, hospital forms with stamps and signatures, bills filled with terms I couldn't pronounce. Among them lay a letter with an official seal from a department dealing with missing medications. Until that second, I hadn't even known such a place existed, or that it could have anything to do with us. She told me that around the time we left, expensive drugs had begun disappearing from the hospital where my father worked. Not simple tablets, but the kind of medicine that creates disasters in the wrong hands. One evening, A coworker had called her in secret to warn her. Certain people believed something they wanted was in our home, and they might come looking for it. My father, she said, was caught in the middle, guilty, trapped, or simply too weak to walk away. Whatever the exact truth was, danger had already started moving toward our front door. She hadn't taken me to punish him or to punish me. She had taken me because she didn't want strangers turning our home into a crime scene while her child watched from a bedroom door. She said she carried me out that night because the danger was already at the threshold. She couldn't let me see something that would cling to me forever and poison every memory I had of my father. She chose to let me hate her if that was the cost. Better, she thought, for me to see her as the villain than watch my father become a monster in the eyes of his own child. As she spoke, the room felt distant, like I was listening from behind glass. My hands turned cold. The story I had repeated to myself for 10 years suddenly seemed too narrow for the weight on the table. She said she had not stolen me from my father. She had tried to protect me from the worst part of his life, from the choices he made or the darkness he allowed around him. I looked at her hands, the same hands that had dragged me out of that house, cooked my meals, paid our rent, aged in front of me while I refused to see them. Tonight they were trembling. Her eyes, once only hard in my memory, now held a quiet, exhausted grief. The look of someone who had stood alone in the dark, carrying a secret heavy enough for both of us. And all I could think, not in words I dared to speak aloud, was that I had spent years hating the only person whose greatest fault had been trying to save me. The candle's flame bent and straightened, throwing thin shadows across the papers. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was filled with misunderstandings, late truths, and a love that had chosen to look like cruelty. Somewhere inside me, the 10-year-old girl was still standing in that hallway, staring at her father in the doorway, convinced he was begging us to stay, and that my mother was the one who betrayed him. Only now did I see that his desperate look might have meant something else. Not a plea for love, but a plea for the truth to remain hidden, for his child never to know what he had done. That girl is still me. I still carry the half-open door and the broken voice. But tonight, 10 years later, for the first time, I am finally starting to see what really stood behind it.